When injustice reaches heaven, begins by acknowledging a painful truth that many chosen ones have lived through, but rarely speak about openly. There are seasons in life when the attacks against you go far beyond normal disagreement or everyday conflict. Instead of simple misunderstandings, you may have faced deliberate mistreatment, betrayal, and emotional pressure from people who seemed determined to break your spirit. These were not moments of casual criticism or temporary tension. They were situations where certain individuals crossed lines of respect and compassion, pushing their behavior into something far more destructive. The chosen one may remember how some people mocked their character, twisted their intentions, or attempted to manipulate the environment around them in order to isolate or weaken them. Words may have been used like weapons. Subtle humiliation may have appeared in conversations, and situations may have been orchestrated in ways that made the chosen one feel constantly under pressure. During those moments, it often felt as though the world was silent. The listener may have wondered whether anyone truly understood what was happening behind the surface of those interactions. When cruelty repeats itself day after day, it can create the feeling that justice is distant, or that truth will never be revealed. Many chosen ones carried this weight quietly, choosing endurance over retaliation, patience over revenge, and dignity over chaos. Yet, in the middle of that silence, something deeper was unfolding beyond what the attackers could see. The message of this moment reveals a powerful spiritual truth. Cruelty may hide from human attention for a time, but it does not disappear into nothingness. When mistreatment crosses a certain line, when manipulation becomes relentless, and when someone intentionally tries to crush another person's spirit, those actions do not vanish into the void. They rise. They echo. They reach places far beyond human conversations and social narratives. What the chosen one experienced was not ignored in the greater order of things. The spiritual realm does not operate by the same timelines as human judgment, but it does recognize injustice when it appears. This is where the deeper realization begins to emerge. The people who believed they could torment the chosen one without consequences misunderstood the nature of what they were provoking. They believed they were simply targeting a person, someone they thought was isolated or powerless. But in reality, they were interfering with something much greater than they understood. The chosen one was never standing alone in the way their attackers imagined. Every moment of restraint, every decision to remain calm instead of retaliating, and every act of quiet endurance was being witnessed in ways those attackers could not perceive. And now, the message begins to reveal the central truth of this story. When cruelty goes too far, when injustice becomes deliberate and relentless, it awakens forces that no group of people can control. Those who believed they were lighting a small fire against the chosen one may have unknowingly ignited something far larger. Something that will ultimately expose the truth and restore balance in ways they never expected. The season when you were tested begins with a period of life that many chosen ones remember as one of the most difficult and confusing chapters of their journey. It was not simply a moment of temporary hardship or a short season of discomfort. Instead, it was a long stretch of time where pressure seemed to come from multiple directions at once, creating an atmosphere that felt heavy and relentless. The chosen one may recall waking up each day with the sense that something was wrong in the environment around them. Conversations felt tense. Attitudes from certain people began shifting, and situations that once seemed stable started turning unpredictable. What made this season particularly challenging was that much of the pressure did not appear openly at first. It often manifested through subtle forms of conflict that slowly built over time. Small remarks carried hidden criticism. Social dynamics began changing without explanation, and interactions that once felt supportive became strangely cold or confrontational. In many cases, the chosen one realized that people around them were intentionally creating situations designed to cause confusion or emotional strain. Some individuals may have attempted to provoke reactions, while others quietly spread tension through gossip or indirect comments. These tactics created an environment where the chosen one constantly had to remain alert, trying to understand what was happening beneath the surface. The emotional toll of this experience cannot be understated. Being surrounded by conflict or manipulation over an extended period can make even the strongest person question their own perception. The listener may remember moments where they asked themselves whether they were misunderstanding the situation or imagining the hostility they were sensing. Yet deep inside, something continued telling them that what they were experiencing was real. The pressure was not accidental. The chosen one was navigating a space where certain people had decided to create instability rather than peace. As time passed, the weight of this environment grew heavier. The listener endured situations that felt unfair, situations where they were blamed for things they did not cause, or placed in circumstances where defending themselves seemed almost impossible. The attacks may not have always been loud or obvious, but they were persistent. Psychological stress appeared through constant tension. Emotional exhaustion developed from repeated misunderstandings, and the chosen one often felt as though they were carrying the burden of surviving rather than thriving. During this season, progress may have felt impossible to measure. Instead of moving forward toward visible achievements, the chosen one found themselves simply trying to maintain stability from one day to the next. Each challenge required patience, each confrontation demanded self-control, and each moment of misunderstanding required resilience. It was a period where survival became the primary focus. The chosen one learned how to endure emotional storms without losing their sense of identity. They practiced restraint when provoked, maintained dignity when misunderstood, and continued moving forward even when the path felt uncertain. Yet within this difficult season, something important was quietly taking shape beneath the surface. What appeared to be a period of relentless pressure was actually shaping qualities that could not have developed in easier circumstances. Every moment of endurance strengthened emotional discipline. Every act of patience reinforced inner stability. Every decision to remain calm instead of retaliating deepened spiritual awareness. The chosen one may not have recognized it at the time, but this season was building something powerful inside them. The challenges they faced were refining their character, teaching them how to remain steady even when surrounded by chaos. This is why the season of testing holds such significance in the journey of the chosen one. It was not simply a time of suffering, it was a time of transformation. While others believed they were applying pressure to break the chosen one's spirit, they were unknowingly contributing to the development of resilience that would later become one of the chosen one's greatest strengths. The listener who survived this season now carries something that cannot easily be shaken. They have experienced the weight of emotional strain and discovered that they could endure far more than they once believed. What once felt like an endless trial was quietly preparing them for a future where their strength, patience, and spiritual endurance would serve a far greater purpose than anyone around them could have imagined at the time. Why some people target the chosen one begins with a truth that many people struggle to understand during the moment when attacks are happening. When someone experiences repeated hostility or unfair treatment, the first instinct is often to ask a painful question. Why is this happening to me? The chosen one may have asked this question many times during the season of pressure and misunderstanding. It can feel confusing when certain individuals seem determined to create conflict, especially when the chosen one has not intentionally harmed or provoked them. Yet the deeper explanation behind this behavior often lies beneath the surface of ordinary interactions. The message explores why certain individuals feel threatened by someone who carries spiritual awareness or quiet strength, and the answer is rarely about the chosen one doing something wrong. Instead, it often has everything to do with what the chosen one naturally represents. A person who carries clarity, honesty, and inner stability has a way of revealing things that others prefer to keep hidden. This does not happen through confrontation alone. Often, it occurs simply through presence. When the chosen one enters a space with a calm mind, clear perception, and an unwillingness to participate in deception, it quietly disrupts environments built on manipulation or dishonesty. Without saying a single word, the chosen one's character becomes a mirror that reflects the truth of what is happening around them. The chosen one's presence exposes dishonesty, manipulation, or hidden motives in ways that make certain individuals uncomfortable. People who rely on controlling narratives or maintaining appearances often depend on others remaining unaware of what they are doing. They feel secure when the environment around them does not question their actions or intentions. But when someone enters that environment with discernment and authenticity, the illusion begins to weaken. The chosen one may notice contradictions in behavior, sense tension where others see harmony, or recognize motives that remain invisible to most people. Even if these insights are never spoken aloud, the awareness itself can disturb those who are trying to maintain control over a situation. This is where the tension begins to grow. Rather than confronting their own flaws, some people choose to attack the person who reveals them. Facing personal shortcomings requires humility and courage, qualities that not everyone is ready to practice. For some individuals, it feels easier to shift attention away from themselves by targeting the one person who seems to see through the illusion. By questioning the chosen one's credibility, spreading doubt, or creating conflict, they attempt to redirect the focus of the environment. If they can convince others that the chosen one is the problem, then the uncomfortable truth about their own behavior remains hidden. This reaction is not always a conscious strategy. Often it emerges from deep emotional insecurity that the individual may not fully understand themselves. Envy, insecurity, and fear often drive this behavior more than deliberate cruelty. Envy appears when someone notices qualities in the chosen one that they secretly wish they possessed, but feel unable to develop. Instead of using that awareness as motivation for growth, they allow resentment to grow. Insecurity emerges when a person senses that their authority or reputation might be threatened by someone who sees through their facade. Fear arises when hidden motives risk being exposed by someone with clarity and courage. Together, these emotions create a powerful motivation to silence or discredit the chosen one before the truth becomes visible to others. The chosen one may not always recognize these dynamics immediately. From their perspective, the attacks may feel personal or confusing, especially when they come from people who once seemed supportive. But understanding this deeper pattern helps reveal an important truth. The hostility directed toward the chosen one is often a reaction to the presence of authenticity. When someone carries integrity and awareness, it creates pressure in environments that depend on deception. Those who are comfortable with honesty will feel inspired by it, while those who rely on manipulation may feel threatened by it. This realization does not mean the chosen one should become bitter or suspicious of everyone around them. Instead, it offers clarity about why certain individuals behave the way they do. The conflict was never simply about personality differences or small disagreements. It was about deeper dynamics of truth and illusion, awareness and denial, courage and fear. The chosen one became a target not because they were weak or vulnerable, but because their presence challenged systems that preferred darkness over clarity. And understanding this truth transforms the way the chosen one sees the entire experience. What once felt like random hostility now reveals itself as a reaction to something powerful within them, something that others sensed even before the chosen one fully understood it themselves. The emotional toll of being targeted begins with a reality that many chosen ones rarely speak about openly. Yet it is one of the most difficult parts of the journey. When someone becomes the focus of repeated criticism, manipulation, or hostility, the experience does not remain only external. It begins to affect the inner world of the person enduring it. Even the strongest individuals are not immune to the emotional weight that accumulates when conflict appears again and again without clear explanation. During this period, the listener may have experienced exhaustion, sadness, and confusion that seemed to deepen over time. It was not simply physical tiredness from stressful situations. It was the kind of emotional fatigue that develops when the mind constantly tries to make sense of something that feels unfair or distorted. The chosen one may remember moments where they sat quietly, replaying conversations and interactions, trying to understand why certain people seemed determined to create tension. They may have wondered how situations escalated so quickly, or why misunderstandings continued appearing even when they attempted to respond calmly and respectfully. Confusion often becomes one of the most painful aspects of this stage because the attacks rarely appear in a straightforward way. Instead, they arrive through layers of indirect comments, subtle accusations, and shifting attitudes that make it difficult to address the problem directly. The chosen one may have sensed that something deeper was happening, but struggled to prove it in a way others could understand. When conflict hides beneath the surface like this, it can create a constant state of emotional alertness. The mind begins anticipating the next misunderstanding, the next criticism, or the next moment of tension. Over time, this emotional vigilance becomes draining. Repeated attacks can cause the chosen one to question themselves in ways they never expected. Even someone who normally carries strong confidence may begin asking difficult questions during moments of quiet reflection. The listener may have wondered whether they had somehow misunderstood the situation, whether they accidentally offended someone without realizing it, or whether their own behavior contributed to the conflict more than they initially believed. These thoughts are not signs of weakness. They are natural responses when a person tries to maintain fairness and accountability in their relationships. The chosen one does not want to become arrogant or blind to their own flaws, so they search honestly for answers within themselves. Yet in environments where manipulation is present, this honest self-reflection can sometimes become a burden. The more the chosen one examines their own actions, the more space attackers gain to continue their narrative. They may have wondered whether they were somehow responsible for the conflict, even when deep inside, something felt wrong about that conclusion. This internal questioning can create moments of sadness that feel difficult to explain. The chosen one may have felt isolated, not only socially, but emotionally, carrying experiences that others did not fully see or understand. There may have been nights where they wondered whether peace would ever return to their environment, or whether the tension would continue indefinitely. Yet this stage of emotional pressure serves a deeper purpose in the journey of the chosen one. It becomes a testing ground for emotional resilience and faith. Resilience develops when a person learns how to remain steady despite repeated attempts to shake their confidence. Each moment where the chosen one chooses patience over reaction, clarity over confusion, and dignity over retaliation strengthens their inner foundation. Faith grows in a similar way during this stage. When the chosen one feels misunderstood by people around them, they begin leaning more deeply on something greater than human approval. They learn that their worth and integrity cannot be determined solely by the opinions of those who misunderstand them. Instead, they begin trusting that truth operates on a longer timeline, one where patience eventually reveals what manipulation tried to hide. Looking back on this stage, the chosen one may realize that the emotional challenges they endured were shaping their inner strength in ways that easier circumstances never could have achieved. The sadness they felt deepened their empathy for others who struggle silently. The confusion they experienced sharpened their discernment, teaching them to observe people's behavior more carefully. And the exhaustion they survived proved something powerful about their own spirit. They were capable of enduring far more than they once believed. This realization becomes one of the most important outcomes of the entire experience. The chosen one who passes through this stage no longer doubts their ability to stand firm when life becomes difficult. They have faced emotional storms and discovered that their identity remains intact even when others try to distort it. What once felt like a season of vulnerability ultimately becomes a foundation of strength that will guide them through every challenge that follows. When silence was misinterpreted as weakness, emerges as one of the most misunderstood parts of the chosen one's journey, because during the height of the attacks, the response that appeared on the surface was not confrontation, but restraint. While tension grew around them and accusations or manipulations unfolded in subtle and sometimes aggressive ways, the chosen one often made a conscious decision to remain calm instead of reacting immediately. This choice did not come from fear or helplessness. It came from a deeper instinct that responding emotionally to every provocation would only feed the chaos that others were trying to create. Yet, in environments where conflict is driven by insecurity or manipulation, calmness can easily be misunderstood. During the attacks, the chosen one often chose restraint instead of retaliation, believing that dignity and patience would eventually reveal the truth more clearly than impulsive reactions. Instead of arguing with every rumor, they focused on maintaining their character. Instead of escalating hostility, they attempted to de-escalate situations whenever possible. This behavior required tremendous self-control, because the emotional pressure surrounding them was intense. It is never easy to remain composed when others attempt to distort your intentions or provoke you publicly. The chosen one had every reason to respond with anger or frustration, yet something inside urged them to remain steady. However, the calm response that protected their integrity was often misinterpreted by those watching the situation unfold. Their calm response may have been mistaken for vulnerability or powerlessness by individuals who believed strength must always appear loud and aggressive. In certain social environments, people assume that silence means defeat or that restraint signals fear. When someone refuses to fight in the same chaotic way others do, it can confuse observers who expect confrontation as the only form of defense. The attackers interpreted this quiet strength through the lens of their own assumptions. Instead of recognizing discipline, they assumed submission. Instead of recognizing patience, they assumed weakness. This misunderstanding created a dangerous illusion for those who were targeting the chosen one. Some attackers believed they could continue escalating without consequences because they assumed the chosen one lacked the courage or authority to challenge them. Each moment of restraint appeared, in their eyes, as permission to push further. They interpreted patience as a sign that they had successfully intimidated their target. This miscalculation encouraged them to grow bolder in their behavior. The tone of their remarks may have become sharper, their accusations louder, and their attempts to provoke reactions more deliberate. They believed they were gaining control over the narrative, believing that silence meant victory. Yet, What they failed to understand was that the silence they were witnessing was not surrender, but discipline, operating at a deeper level. Silence was not weakness. It was discipline, rooted in emotional intelligence and spiritual awareness. The Chosen One understood something that the attackers did not. Reacting impulsively would only validate the narrative being constructed against them. When people attempt to provoke anger, they are often hoping to capture that reaction as proof of their accusations. By refusing to participate in that cycle, the Chosen One denied them the evidence they were trying to manufacture. This form of discipline requires extraordinary inner control because it demands patience during moments when defending oneself emotionally feels justified. The Chosen One practiced restraint not because they lacked the ability to respond, but because they recognized that timing and clarity matter more than immediate reaction. They understood that truth does not always reveal itself through loud confrontation, but often through consistency over time. While others rushed to conclusions, the Chosen One focused on preserving their integrity. This approach slowly created a contrast between behavior and accusation. The attackers relied on escalating drama, while the Chosen One maintained calm stability. Over time, this contrast becomes visible to those who observe carefully. The calmness that was once mistaken for weakness begins revealing itself as strength of character. People who pay attention start recognizing that someone who remains composed under repeated pressure possesses a level of control that aggression cannot replicate. Looking back, the Chosen One may realize that their silence was one of the most powerful responses they could have chosen. By refusing to be pulled into the emotional storms created by others, they protected their reputation and preserved their clarity of mind. What seemed like passive behavior was actually a deliberate strategy rooted in wisdom. The restraint they practiced during those difficult moments became evidence of a deeper maturity that their attackers never anticipated. And in the end, the very silence that others mocked as weakness becomes the foundation of the Chosen One's credibility when the truth finally begins to surface. The line that should never have been crossed arrives at the moment in the story when ordinary tension transforms into something far more serious. Up to this point, the Chosen One had endured pressure, misunderstanding, and subtle hostility that often remained hidden beneath the surface of normal interactions. But there comes a point in every conflict where restraint and patience are no longer interpreted as dignity by those creating the problem. Instead, they see it as an invitation to push further. This is the moment when boundaries begin disappearing and behavior becomes more aggressive, more public, and more deliberate. Eventually, the attacks intensified beyond ordinary conflict, moving from indirect criticism and manipulation into actions that carried the clear intention of causing emotional damage. What once appeared as gossip or tension slowly evolved into attempts to undermine the Chosen One's reputation and stability. The atmosphere around them became increasingly hostile, as though certain individuals were determined to test how far they could push the situation without facing consequences. In environments like this, cruelty often escalates because the attackers begin feeding off the reactions of those around them. If the Chosen One remains calm, they push harder. If the Chosen One defends themselves, they twist the response into further accusations. The cycle grows heavier with each passing moment. Some individuals attempted to humiliate, isolate, or emotionally break the Chosen One in ways that revealed the true nature of their intentions. Public remarks may have been made that questioned the Chosen One's character. Private conversations may have been used to spread narratives that portrayed them as unstable or difficult. Social dynamics may have been manipulated so that the Chosen One appeared increasingly alone. Isolation is a powerful tool for those who seek control over a narrative, because when someone is cut off from support, their voice becomes easier to dismiss. The attackers may have believed that if they could weaken the Chosen One emotionally, Eventually, that person would either withdraw or collapse under the pressure. From their perspective, this strategy appeared effective because the chosen one had already demonstrated restraint rather than retaliation. They believed the chosen one was alone and defenseless, someone who had no power to challenge the environment they were creating. In their minds, the situation had become a contest they were already winning. The silence of the chosen one seemed like confirmation that the pressure was working. They convinced themselves that the chosen one's calmness meant defeat, and that their own voices now controlled the story. Yet this belief was built on a misunderstanding that many people make when they underestimate someone who carries deeper strength. The attackers evaluated the situation only through human perception, measuring influence through social dynamics, popularity, or immediate reactions. They assumed that power belonged to whoever controlled the loudest narrative in the moment. What they failed to realize was that cruelty at this level awakens consequences beyond human control. When hostility reaches the point where someone deliberately tries to break another person's spirit, the situation begins moving into territory that extends beyond ordinary human conflict. The chosen one may appear isolated on the surface, but isolation in the physical world does not mean abandonment in the deeper order of things. Every act of injustice leaves an imprint. Every attempt to destroy someone's character carries weight. And every moment of restraint shown by the chosen one becomes part of a larger balance that unfolds over time. The attackers believed they were pushing someone toward collapse, but what they were actually doing was crossing a boundary that transforms a personal conflict into something much larger. This is the point where the energy of the situation begins shifting. The chosen one may not see the shift immediately, because consequences often develop quietly before they appear publicly. But the moment cruelty reaches this level, the dynamic changes. The very actions that the attackers believed would secure their victory begin planting the seeds of their exposure. Every exaggerated accusation creates contradictions. Every attempt at humiliation reveals more about the character of those initiating it. Every effort to isolate the chosen one eventually attracts the attention of observers who begin questioning why such extreme hostility exists. Looking back on this stage of the journey, the chosen one may realize that the attacks reached a level where something important happened beneath the surface. The pressure that was meant to destroy them instead revealed the depth of their resilience. Their refusal to respond with equal cruelty created a contrast that slowly began exposing the imbalance of the situation. What appeared to be a moment where the attackers gained total control was actually the moment where they unknowingly crossed a line that would ultimately shift the entire story. They believed they were writing the ending of the chosen one's reputation, but in reality, they had ignited a chain of consequences that would eventually reveal the truth with far greater clarity than any confrontation could have achieved. When heaven takes notice marks the moment when the story shifts from a purely human conflict into something deeper and far more consequential. Up until this point, the chosen one's experience may have seemed like a struggle unfolding entirely within the visible world. A painful sequence of misunderstandings, manipulation, and relentless pressure created by people who believed they controlled the situation. The attacks appeared to operate within social dynamics, reputations, conversations, and environments where power was measured by influence and perception. Yet beneath that visible layer, something else was quietly unfolding. There comes a moment in certain struggles when the weight of injustice crosses an invisible threshold. A point where the suffering being inflicted is no longer simply a matter of personal conflict, but a disruption of a deeper balance. This is the turning point that the message introduces, the moment when heaven takes notice. For the chosen one, it may not have felt dramatic or obvious at first. Life may have continued as it always had, with the same pressures and uncertainties surrounding them. The listener may have wondered whether their endurance truly mattered, or whether their quiet resilience was disappearing unnoticed into the chaos around them. When a person is surrounded by conflict long enough, it can begin to feel as though the universe itself has grown silent. Yet the truth, operating behind the scenes, is very different. The suffering of the Chosen One was not ignored, even during the moments when it felt invisible to others. Every act of restraint, every moment of dignity under pressure, and every decision to choose patience over retaliation carries significance beyond what human observers can measure. While attackers often believe their behavior exists within a closed system where they control the narrative, they fail to recognize that injustice creates ripples that extend far beyond their immediate environment. Actions driven by cruelty and manipulation do not vanish into nothingness. They accumulate. They echo. They create consequences that slowly build momentum until the balance of the situation begins shifting. Injustice and cruelty eventually reach a threshold where divine justice becomes involved, not through dramatic lightning bolts or sudden miracles, but through the unfolding of truth in ways that no human strategy can fully control. This moment is rarely recognized immediately by those responsible for the harm they caused. The attackers continue believing they are still shaping the outcome of the situation. They continue repeating the same patterns of behavior, confident that their narrative remains dominant. But what they fail to perceive is that their actions have already set something larger in motion. Each attempt to manipulate the story begins creating contradictions. Each effort to silence the Chosen One begins attracting the attention of observers who sense that something is not right. Each exaggerated accusation begins unraveling under closer examination. The attackers unknowingly triggered a reaction they did not anticipate. A reaction that does not rely on confrontation or retaliation from the Chosen One, but instead emerges through the slow revelation of reality itself. This is how divine justice often operates. It does not rush forward to satisfy human impatience. Instead, it unfolds through time, allowing behavior to expose itself naturally. The Chosen One may have felt powerless during the earlier stages of the conflict, believing that silence left them defenseless. Yet silence often creates space for truth to surface without interference. When someone refuses to participate in chaos, their consistency becomes a mirror, reflecting the instability of those attacking them. Over time, people begin noticing the contrast. The Chosen One remains steady, composed, and consistent, while the attackers grow increasingly aggressive and contradictory in their behavior. This contrast slowly shifts perception. People who once believed the narrative being pushed against the Chosen One begin noticing inconsistencies. Questions emerge quietly in conversations. Doubts appear in the minds of those who were once certain of the accusations. The attackers may attempt to tighten their control over the situation, pushing their narrative even harder, but every escalation only increases the visibility of their motives. What once appeared to be confidence now begins looking like desperation. This is the moment where the deeper order of justice begins revealing itself. The Chosen One did not need to orchestrate revenge or fight every accusation, because the structure of truth itself begins dismantling the illusion that was built against them. Divine justice rarely appears through dramatic confrontation. Instead, it operates through exposure. The attackers who once felt untouchable begin experiencing consequences created by their own behavior. Relationships they relied on begin weakening. Their credibility begins eroding as others notice patterns they previously overlooked. The same social environment they believed they controlled slowly begins questioning them. For the Chosen One, witnessing this shift can feel surreal. For so long, they endured pressure, believing that no one understood what was happening. Now the truth begins surfacing in ways that feel almost effortless compared to the emotional battles they fought earlier. Situations that once seemed hopeless begin correcting themselves. Conversations that once dismissed their perspective begin acknowledging it. The chosen one may realize that the outcome unfolding around them was never dependent on their ability to defend themselves alone. Something larger was always present, quietly observing every moment of injustice and every act of endurance. This realization brings a powerful sense of clarity. The chosen one understands that the suffering they endured was never meaningless. Every moment of patience strengthened their character, while simultaneously building the foundation for truth to emerge. The attackers believed they were lighting a fire meant to consume the chosen one's reputation and spirit. Instead, they ignited a process that would eventually illuminate the entire situation. When heaven takes notice, the outcome no longer belongs to the plans of those who created the conflict. It begins unfolding through a deeper order, where truth, patience, and integrity gradually overpower manipulation and cruelty. The chosen one may not have seen it happening in the moment, but every step of their journey was leading toward this turning point. The moment where the balance begins shifting and the consequences of injustice begin returning to those who created it. The fire they ignited unfolds as the moment when the story quietly begins turning in a direction that none of the attackers expected. Up until now, those who tormented the chosen one believed they were steadily increasing their influence over the situation. From their perspective, every rumor they spread, every moment of humiliation they attempted, and every social maneuver they orchestrated appeared to strengthen their control over the narrative. They watched the chosen one endure pressure without retaliation, and assumed that their silence meant defeat. In their minds, the conflict had already been decided. They believed they were gaining power, slowly shaping the environment so that their version of events would become the only one people remembered. The more the chosen one remained calm, the more confident the attackers became. They interpreted patience as weakness and restraint as submission. What they did not understand was that they were unknowingly igniting something far more powerful than the temporary influence they thought they possessed. The fire they lit was not consuming the chosen one the way they expected. Instead, it was beginning to illuminate the truth of everything that had been happening behind the scenes. Those who tormented the chosen one believed they were building a fortress of control around the narrative they created. They assumed that if enough voices repeated the same accusations, those accusations would eventually become accepted as reality. In environments where perception often matters more than truth, this strategy can appear effective for a time. People may hesitate to question a story that seems widely supported. Observers may remain silent out of fear of becoming the next target. For a while, the attackers felt secure in this illusion of dominance. Yet the deeper order of reality does not operate on repetition alone. Truth has a way of revealing itself through patterns of behavior that cannot remain hidden forever. As time passed, something subtle began happening beneath the surface of the situation. The attackers continued repeating their accusations, but their own actions slowly began creating inconsistencies that observers could not ignore. When someone builds a narrative through manipulation, maintaining that narrative requires constant effort. Every new accusation must match the previous one. Every story must align with earlier claims. Every action must support the image they are trying to project. But manipulation is unstable by nature. It demands continuous control, and eventually, control begins slipping through the hands of those trying to maintain it. Instead of gaining permanent power, their actions activated a chain of consequences that began unfolding quietly around them. At first, these consequences appeared in small ways. A conversation that once supported their story suddenly included doubt. A person who once repeated their narrative began asking questions. Someone who had remained silent started observing more carefully. These moments may have seemed insignificant individually, but together, they began creating cracks in the structure of the illusion the attackers had built. The chosen one did not need to force these cracks open. The attackers were creating them through their own behavior. Every time they pushed the narrative harder, their frustration became more visible. Their tone became sharper, their accusations more exaggerated, and their reactions more defensive whenever someone challenged them. Observers began noticing that the chosen one remained calm and consistent, while the attackers seemed increasingly agitated and unpredictable. This contrast slowly changed the atmosphere around the situation. People who once accepted the narrative without question began re-evaluating what they were witnessing. Their own behavior begins exposing their intentions in ways they never anticipated. Manipulation works best when it remains subtle and hidden beneath normal interactions. But when the same individuals repeatedly attack someone who refuses to retaliate, their hostility becomes difficult to justify. The more they attempted to destroy the chosen one's reputation, the more their own character became visible. Their impatience revealed insecurity. Their aggression revealed desperation. Their persistence revealed motives that had little to do with truth and everything to do with control. The chosen one did not need to reveal these motives publicly, because the attackers were revealing them through their own actions. Each step they took to tighten their grip on the situation only made their behavior appear more extreme. Meanwhile, the chosen one continued moving forward with the same calm discipline that had guided them from the beginning. They focused on maintaining their character rather than winning arguments. They allowed time to pass rather than rushing to prove themselves. This approach created a powerful contrast between reaction and restraint. People who paid attention began noticing the difference. They saw one side becoming louder, angrier, and more unstable, while the other side remained steady and composed. Over time, the situation they tried to control starts slipping beyond their influence. The attackers may have believed they controlled the environment, but control based on manipulation is fragile. Once observers begin questioning the narrative, the structure begins collapsing rapidly. Conversations that once repeated the accusations now examine them critically. People who once avoided involvement begin distancing themselves from the hostility. The attackers find themselves repeating the same arguments with increasing urgency, hoping to restore the certainty they once felt. But the more they push, the more obvious their desperation becomes. This is the moment when the fire they ignited begins spreading in directions they cannot control. What they started as an attack against the chosen one begins turning into an exposure of their own behavior. Their words and actions, once hidden behind confidence, now appear reckless and aggressive to those watching. The environment they believed they dominated begins shifting in subtle but undeniable ways. People who once listened quietly now speak cautiously about what they are observing. Doubt grows. Curiosity replaces certainty. The narrative that once seemed solid now feels unstable. For the chosen one, this stage can feel both surprising and deeply validating. For so long, they endured pressure believing they had no control over the situation. Now they witnessed the situation correcting itself through the very actions that were meant to destroy them. They realized that their patience was not wasted. Their silence was not defeat. Their restraint allowed truth to emerge naturally, rather than being buried beneath emotional reactions. Looking back on this moment, the chosen one may understand that the attackers made a critical mistake when they believed they could torment someone indefinitely without consequences. They underestimated the power of consistency, the patience required to allow truth to surface, and the deeper forces that begin moving when injustice reaches its limit. The fire they ignited was never meant to consume the chosen one. It was destined to illuminate everything that had been hidden. And as that fire continues spreading, it becomes impossible for the attackers to contain the consequences they themselves set into motion. When the truth begins to surface, marks the phase in the journey where the invisible currents that have been moving quietly beneath the situation finally begin rising into view. For a long time, the chosen one lived inside a fog of misunderstanding created by rumors, distortions, and calculated pressure. During that earlier period, the environment felt heavy with confusion. People seemed unsure of what to believe. Conversations carried tension, and the truth felt buried beneath layers of narrative constructed by those who wanted control over the situation. Yet time has a remarkable way of peeling away illusions. When behavior repeats itself consistently enough, patterns begin forming that attentive observers cannot ignore. As time passes, people begin seeing the situation more clearly, even if they never openly admit that their perspective is changing. It begins with small observations. Someone remembers a conversation that once seemed believable, but now feels exaggerated. Another person notices that the chosen one's actions do not align with the accusations that were made against them. These moments of quiet recognition spread slowly through an environment. Doubt rarely arrives with loud announcements. Instead, it appears as a subtle shift in how people listen, how they watch, and how they interpret what they are witnessing. The chosen one's character remains consistent despite the attacks, and this consistency becomes the most powerful force revealing the truth. While the attackers relied on emotional pressure, the chosen one continued operating through the same calm discipline that carried them through the earlier storms. They did not suddenly transform into someone new in order to defend themselves. They remained the same person they had always been, someone who valued clarity, patience, and dignity. In situations where others expected anger or retaliation, they responded with restraint. When rumors circulated, they focused on maintaining their integrity rather than chasing every accusation. This steady behavior slowly began creating a contrast that people could not overlook. Those who watched carefully realized something important. The person accused of instability remained composed. The person accused of manipulation continued demonstrating transparency. The individual portrayed as problematic behaved with patience and respect. Over time, this contrast began raising questions in the minds of observers who once accepted the narrative without hesitation. Meanwhile, contradictions and toxic behavior appear among the attackers in ways they struggle to hide. The very individuals who once spoke with confidence about the chosen one's supposed flaws began revealing patterns in their own conduct that made others uncomfortable. Their tone grew harsher, their reactions more defensive, and their need to control conversations more obvious. People who once listened quietly started noticing the emotional intensity behind the accusations. Instead of calm explanations, the attackers relied increasingly on repetition and exaggeration. This shift became impossible to ignore because it exposed a difference between those defending themselves and those attempting to dominate the narrative. When someone is telling the truth, they rarely need to force others to believe it. Truth tends to stand quietly on its own. But when someone relies on manipulation, they must constantly reinforce the story through pressure and persuasion. Observers began recognizing this difference more clearly as time passed. The attackers who once appeared confident now seemed restless whenever someone questioned their claims. Their reactions revealed more emotion than evidence. Their frustration appeared whenever the conversation moved away from their narrative. These responses slowly changed the atmosphere surrounding the situation. People began sensing that something deeper had been happening all along. The chosen one's calm presence acted like a mirror, reflecting the imbalance between accusation and behavior. While the attackers attempted to maintain control, their own actions kept revealing cracks in the story they created. Public perception slowly begins shifting in ways that may not be immediately visible, but become undeniable over time. The same environment that once echoed with criticism gradually becomes quieter. Conversations change tone. Instead of repeating accusations, people begin discussing observations. Instead of assuming guilt, they begin analyzing behavior. This shift rarely happens through dramatic confrontations. It unfolds through subtle moments where individuals start trusting their own perception more than the narrative they were given. Someone may privately admit that the chosen one never behaved the way the accusations suggested. Another person may recall how the attackers consistently pushed the story, while the chosen one simply continued living with dignity. These realizations begin connecting like pieces of a puzzle. The bigger picture emerges slowly, but steadily. For the chosen one, witnessing this shift can feel almost surreal. There was a time when every conversation seemed stacked against them. Every attempt to clarify the truth felt like shouting into the wind. Now the environment begins correcting itself without their intervention. The chosen one does not need to fight every rumor, because the contradictions speak for themselves. Observers who once remained neutral begin leaning toward the evidence created by consistent behavior. People start recognizing that the narrative they were told does not match the reality they have been witnessing. This stage of the journey demonstrates a powerful principle about truth and patience. When someone tries to build a false narrative against a person who continues living with integrity, time becomes an ally of the truth. Each day that passes without the chosen one collapsing under pressure becomes another piece of evidence supporting their character. Each moment where the attackers grow louder while the chosen one remains calm becomes another signal revealing who truly holds stability. The chosen one's greatest defense was never a clever argument or a dramatic confrontation. It was consistency. By continuing to act with dignity, they allowed the environment around them to observe the contrast between behavior and accusation. This contrast becomes impossible to ignore once enough time has passed. Eventually, people begin acknowledging what their instincts have been telling them quietly for months. The accusations do not align with reality. The hostility directed toward the chosen one appears excessive. The emotional intensity of the attackers begins looking suspicious rather than convincing. These realizations create the turning point where the narrative begins collapsing under its own weight. The attackers may attempt to regain control by repeating their claims more forcefully. But repetition cannot repair a story that has already begun unraveling. Observers have seen too much. They have watched the chosen one endure pressure without losing composure. They have noticed the contrast between calm resilience and escalating aggression. They have seen how the narrative depended on noise rather than evidence. Once these patterns become visible, the situation changes permanently. The chosen one does not need to demand vindication because perception itself begins shifting naturally. People start offering subtle gestures of respect where silence once existed. Conversations become more open and balanced. Individuals who once believed the accusations may quietly withdraw from those who spread them. The environment that once felt hostile gradually becomes more neutral and eventually more supportive. This transformation does not erase the pain the chosen one endured earlier, but it reveals something powerful about the journey they survived. The attacks that once felt overwhelming were never strong enough to permanently hide the truth. Manipulation can create temporary confusion, but it cannot maintain its illusion forever when confronted by consistent character. The chosen one's quiet endurance became the foundation upon which the truth eventually stood. The fire that was meant to consume their reputation instead illuminated the behavior of everyone involved. As the truth continues surfacing, the chosen one realizes that the patience they practiced during the darkest moments was not wasted. Each moment of restraint allowed the illusion to weaken naturally. Each act of dignity strengthened the contrast that observers eventually recognized. What once felt like a lonely struggle becomes evidence of inner strength that no accusation could destroy. And as the environment around them grows clearer, the chosen one understands something profound about the nature of justice. Truth does not always arrive quickly, but when it does arrive, it carries a clarity that no manipulation can withstand. Why the chosen one did not need revenge reveals one of the most powerful lessons hidden within the entire journey. A lesson that often becomes clear only after the storm begins to settle. During the earlier stages of conflict, when accusations were loud and pressure seemed relentless, many people watching from the outside may have expected the chosen one to fight back with equal intensity. In environments where conflict escalates quickly, retaliation often feels like the natural response. People believe that defending oneself requires matching aggression with aggression, accusation with accusation, and force with force. Yet the chosen one followed a very different path, a path that at times may have looked confusing even to those who supported them. Instead of engaging in every confrontation, instead of responding to every rumor, and instead of chasing every person who tried to damage their reputation, the chosen one chose restraint. This restraint was not passivity or weakness. It was the result of a deeper understanding about how truth eventually reveals itself. The chosen one's greatest strength was restraint, because restraint requires a level of discipline that reaction does not. Anyone can respond emotionally when provoked. Anyone can escalate a conflict by raising their voice louder than the person accusing them. But maintaining calm in the middle of hostility requires inner stability that few people develop. During the moments when the chosen one could have chosen anger, they chose patience. During the moments when retaliation would have felt justified, they chose dignity. This decision was not always easy. There were undoubtedly moments when the pressure felt unbearable and the temptation to defend themselves aggressively seemed strong. But something inside the chosen one understood that entering the same battlefield of chaos would only strengthen the illusion being built against them. When a person attacks through manipulation, they often hope their target will respond emotionally. An emotional reaction becomes evidence they can use to justify their narrative. By refusing to provide that reaction, the chosen one denied them the proof they were seeking. Instead of fighting every battle personally, they allowed truth and time to reveal reality in ways that arguments alone could never achieve. This approach required tremendous patience, because truth does not reveal itself instantly. There were days when it may have felt as though the narrative against the chosen one was growing stronger. Conversations around them may have echoed accusations that seemed unfair or exaggerated. Observers who lacked the full picture may have repeated those accusations without questioning them. During those moments, the chosen one had to trust a principle that is difficult for many people to practice: that consistency over time carries more power than temporary confrontation. By continuing to live with integrity, the chosen one slowly created a contrast between who they truly were and the version of them being described by their attackers. Every day that passed without the chosen one reacting with hostility weakened the credibility of the accusations. Every situation where they behaved with calm intelligence exposed the exaggeration within the narrative created against them. This process did not require dramatic speeches or public defenses. It unfolded quietly through daily behavior. People who observed closely began noticing that the person described as unstable behaved with remarkable patience. The individual accused of manipulation remained transparent and respectful. The contrast between accusation and behavior slowly became impossible to ignore. Their calm response protected their integrity in ways that retaliation never could have achieved. Integrity is fragile when placed inside the chaos of emotional battles. Even when someone is defending themselves legitimately, intense conflict can blur the perception of observers. Anger often creates confusion about who is truly at fault. By maintaining composure, the chosen one protected the clarity of their character. Their behavior remained consistent, even under pressure, and this consistency became the strongest evidence in their favor. Over time, people began recognizing that someone capable of maintaining such calm under attack likely possessed a level of self-control that contradicted the accusations against them. The attackers, on the other hand, struggled to maintain the same discipline. As their frustration grew, their reactions became more intense. They repeated their claims with greater urgency, attempted to reinforce their narrative more aggressively, and displayed emotions that revealed insecurity rather than confidence. This contrast slowly shifted perception among those who were watching carefully. The chosen one did not need to expose the attackers because the attackers exposed themselves through their own behavior. What the chosen one understood, perhaps instinctively, was that revenge rarely produces the justice people expect. Revenge often traps a person inside the same emotional energy that created the conflict in the first place. When someone focuses on retaliation, they become entangled in the story of their attackers. Their attention shifts from growth to confrontation, from clarity to conflict. The chosen one refused to surrender their energy to that cycle. Instead of allowing anger to define their actions, they focused on maintaining their direction. They continued developing their abilities, strengthening their character, and protecting their peace. This decision gradually transformed the entire situation. As time passed, the narrative created by the attackers began collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. Observers started noticing inconsistencies between the accusations and the chosen one's behavior. Conversations that once repeated the narrative began questioning it. The same environment that once seemed hostile began recognizing the imbalance between accusation and reality. This transformation occurred not because the chosen one fought harder than their attackers, but because they refused to fight in the same destructive way. Their patience ultimately allowed justice to unfold naturally, guided by the simple principle that truth reveals itself through consistent behavior over time. When the chosen one looks back at this chapter of their life, they may realize that restraint was one of the most powerful choices they could have made. Revenge might have provided temporary emotional satisfaction, but it would not have revealed the deeper truth of the situation. Patience, on the other hand, allowed reality itself to correct the narrative. The chosen one emerged from the conflict with their integrity intact, while those who attempted to destroy them revealed far more about themselves than they ever intended. This realization carries an important lesson for anyone walking a similar path. True strength is not measured by how fiercely someone fights back when attacked. It is measured by their ability to remain aligned with their values, even when others attempt to pull them into chaos. The chosen one did not need revenge because the truth they carried was stronger than any accusation. Time, patience, and integrity did the work that anger could never accomplish. And in the end, the justice that unfolded was far more powerful than anything retaliation could have achieved. Stronger represents the moment when the chosen one begins seeing their journey from an entirely new perspective. For a long time, the experience may have felt like an endless storm, a chapter filled with confusion, pressure, and emotional strain that seemed to appear without reason. During the darkest moments, it was difficult to imagine that anything meaningful could emerge from such a painful season. Yet as the dust begins to settle and the truth slowly surfaces, the chosen one realizes that the experience did not break them the way others intended. Instead, it shaped them in ways that could not have happened through comfort or ease. The chosen one emerges from the experience stronger, wiser, and more spiritually aware, because adversity forced them to discover abilities they never knew they possessed. When someone faces constant pressure, yet continues standing with dignity, they begin developing a level of inner strength that cannot be easily shaken again. Situations that once felt overwhelming now appear different through the lens of experience. The chosen one recognizes that they survived circumstances that might have discouraged or defeated them in earlier stages of life. This realization changes the way they see themselves. Confidence grows not from external praise, but from the quiet knowledge that they endured something difficult without losing their values. What once felt like torment becomes part of their transformation, revealing lessons that only adversity could teach. The chosen one learns how to read people more carefully, understanding the difference between genuine support and hidden motives. They learn how to protect their peace without becoming cold or bitter. They develop discernment that allows them to sense unhealthy dynamics long before they escalate into conflict. These insights become tools that guide them through future situations with greater clarity and wisdom. The emotional pressure they once carried now becomes a source of empathy for others who are struggling silently. Because the chosen one understands pain from personal experience, they become more compassionate toward those facing similar challenges. Their endurance becomes evidence of their character in ways that others cannot easily dismiss. Anyone can appear strong during calm seasons, but true character reveals itself when someone stands firm in the middle of adversity. The chosen one demonstrated patience when anger might have felt easier. They practiced restraint when retaliation seemed justified. They chose integrity when manipulation attempted to distort their story. These decisions left a lasting impression on those who observed the situation carefully. Over time, people begin recognizing that someone who can endure intense pressure without losing their composure carries a strength that deserves respect. The reputation that once seemed threatened becomes even more solid because it survived public testing. The chosen one understands something important about fire and transformation. The same fire meant to destroy them becomes the fire that refines them, revealing the depth of their resilience. In nature, fire can either consume or purify, depending on what it touches. For those who rely on deception, exposure becomes destructive because it reveals what they hope to hide. For the chosen one, however, the fire of adversity removes illusions and reveals the core of their strength. What remains after the flames settle is not weakness, but clarity. They know who they are and what they stand for. They understand that their value does not depend on the approval of those who misunderstood them. Instead, it comes from the character they demonstrated when their integrity was tested. As this chapter closes, the chosen one steps forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The pain they endured did not define their future, but prepared them for it. The lessons gained through endurance now serve as a foundation for greater wisdom and stability. The fire that once threatened to destroy their peace becomes the very force that shaped their transformation, turning a season of suffering into the beginning of a stronger and more confident path ahead. The fire they started will finish the story. Brings the journey to a place of deep understanding, where the chosen one can finally see the entire experience through a clearer lens. For a long time, the events that unfolded around them may have felt chaotic and deeply unfair. The attacks seemed relentless, the misunderstandings painful, and the silence surrounding their suffering difficult to carry. Yet when the full story is viewed from a wider perspective, something remarkable becomes visible. The message closes with a powerful reminder that what looked like a destructive fire was never meant to consume the chosen one in the way their attackers imagined. Instead, it became the very force that exposed the truth and refined the character of the one who endured it. Those who mistreated the chosen one believed they were in control of the situation. They believed their words shaped reality, their influence could silence opposition, and their narrative would become the version of events everyone accepted. For a time, it may have appeared that way. Their voices were loud, their accusations repeated, and the chosen one seemed isolated within the environment they controlled. But control built on manipulation never remains stable forever. The same actions that gave them temporary power began creating consequences they could not predict. Cruelty often ignites consequences far beyond human intention, because every act of injustice carries a momentum that eventually reveals itself. The people who believed they were writing the ending of the chosen one's story were unknowingly setting the stage for something entirely different. Their hostility created the contrast that allowed truth to become visible. Their pressure revealed the chosen one's resilience. Their attempts at destruction illuminated the strength of someone who refused to surrender their integrity. As the truth continues surfacing, the chosen one understands that their suffering was never meaningless. Each moment of patience, each act of restraint, and each decision to remain calm during the storm became part of a larger story unfolding beyond the immediate conflict. The listener is encouraged to see their suffering not as defeat, but as part of a greater transformation. What once felt like a battle for survival now appears as a chapter that shaped their strength, sharpened their discernment, and revealed the depth of their character. The final message becomes clear. The fire that others started against the chosen one will not destroy them. Instead, it will illuminate the truth for everyone who watches carefully. In that light, the chosen one's endurance becomes undeniable, and the strength that lived quietly inside them all along finally stands revealed.